Bob, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. This is the second time we've been able to record together. I've followed you for a lot of years. Where does today's recording find you?
I'm at home in Oakland, California.
You, if I recall correctly, have owned, I think you told me last time we talked, 3 agencies. And is it 3?
2. I've been a part of 3 agencies, but I've only been a partner in 2 of them. Yeah.
You've written, how many books is it now? I think it was 6 at my last count.
7. You missed one.
7. Okay. And there are a fair number of times that I have checked the top books in, I think it's advertising and marketing or something like that on Amazon. And you've had 1 or more books in that top 10 or something.
Yeah. Each of my books was a number 1 Amazon seller in the advertising category. But, what does that mean? How many people read advertising books? Only idiots like us. So it's I had a large piece of a very small slice.
Well, I have 3 children. They're fairly young, and I will say to them, somewhat related to this, I hope, that generally, all things being equal, I would rather be a big fish in a small pond than a big fish in a big pond where there are a lot of other big fish. So
yeah. A king among cats rather than a cat among kings.
I like it. You have, I think, also spoken to the European Parliament. Is that right?
Yes. I was invited to speak in Belgium to the European Parliament in 2023. That was very exciting. And 2 years before that, I spoke to members of Parliament in the UK. But that was during COVID, and I did it via, video rather than actually traveling to London. But the experience in Belgium was very gratifying. It was great. I loved it.
That's awesome. Well, so we've hit on a couple of things from your past. So whether in brief or at length, sort of what has your journey been, and where does that bring you to whatever it is that you're doing today?
I started my work career as a science teacher, believe it or not, in middle school in New York City. And I was the worst teacher in the history of education. I just wasn't for me. I was teaching middle school and I was teaching science, and only 2 problems with that. I don't know anything about science, and I don't like children. So, it wasn't for me. Did that for a few years, and then I decided I really wanted to be a writer of some sort. And so I got a job as a copywriter in New York at Panasonic, the electronics company. I worked there for a couple of years. Then I moved out to San Francisco, and I got a job at a small agency there, and we grew the agency. At one point, we were the largest independent in San Francisco. We sold that agency to an international agency. I worked for them for a couple of years, and I didn't like working for anyone else. I'm too big a pain in the ass to work for anyone else. So I left there, and I did 3 years I had a creative services company. And I did that for 3 years. And then I missed the agency business, believe it or not. And I went back into the agency business. And we had a nice agency, and we grew it for like 20 years. And then I retired in 2013 and stumbled into a career writing books and speaking. And I did that for about 10 years. And now I'm pretty much retired from retirement, and I'm doing nothing very much. Every now and then I write something about advertising, just as kind of with bemused detachment, or maybe it's detached bemusement, whatever it is. But I'm no longer seriously dedicated to advertising world. And I'm enjoying being, just became a grandfather 5 months ago, and that's great. And doing a lot of traveling to Chicago, where my daughter and grandchild live. And that's pretty much what I'm doing.
I think I recall when you wrote in maybe your email newsletter or something like that 2, 3 years ago that you would not be regularly writing anymore. That, you said something to the effect of, when I have something I really want to say, I will say it. And I feel like since then, things have seemed to come in spurts. Like sometimes you will send out an email or write an article, and then you may have one the very next week. And then there could be a long time in between. But I think I also remember you might have said something like the issues of things like online tracking, digital advertising, hyper targeting. We could throw in any number of keywords here that the those people haven't woken up, and maybe I could say, to those issues, and the problems fundamentally have not changed. And so I think what I read into that was, why just keep saying the same thing? Do, do you feel like I'm characterizing your, I guess, motivation or mindset properly?
Yeah, I'm. How many times can you rewrite the same shit? You know what I mean? And that I keep talking about this. I've been doing it since 2010, believe it or not. That I've been writing about the dangers of tracking, and nobody seems to care. I mean, there are some people who care, but for the most part, it's a big issue to me, but it doesn't seem to be a big issue to many other people.
While we have seen plenty of change or drama in social media, and we have seen, Cambridge Analytica and other news, privacy, manipulation, whatever stories, do you think that whether it's from 2010 until now or from 2020 until now, over some span of time, do you feel like there has been any substantive growth or decline in concern about tracking?
Not in the U.S. And there is, the Europeans are a little. Actually, they're more than a little ahead of us on this. They have regulations. Sadly, they haven't been very well enforced, but they have regulations that are much more stringent than those in the U.S. about digital policy. And it's disconcerting. It's getting worse now with all the billionaire tech boys now being friendly with Washington. Um, the opportunity for sensible government intervention into the abuse of personal data and information has passed. And maybe it'll come back in a few years, but right now there's very little momentum that I see. Maybe I'm not tuned in like I should be, but I don't see any momentum in that direction now.
I think if I could summarize some of what I think I've heard from you over the years into a couple of statements, perhaps, I think that maybe on the consumer side of things, that you have an issue with tracking and hyper targeting and any number of things, because there's the opportunity for manipulation, because there are privacy concerns. There may be other issues, and I would love for you to
Sure.
enlighten me. But then if I can throw in here as well, first, I think I have also heard from you quite a few more concerns on the brand side of things, whether we want to talk just about brands or the whole industry, agencies, tech companies, whatever, because we have issues of like, do we have quote unquote water cooler moments anymore? Are you able to, as I think I became aware of this idea from you, are you able to make your brand famous anymore when nobody sees the same thing? We have a lot of data on people in our database, let's say, and then we get hacked. And so there are any number of things, but I'm I would love for you to, sort of explore or take apart any either the consumer side and or the brand industry side of things so that we can sort of make clear what some of the problems are as you see it.
Yeah, well, let's start with the big issues. And the big issues, I think, are about tracking and how that is dangerous both to individuals, to democratic institutions, and to national security. The worst governments in history, the worst governments in history, have had one thing in common. They're the ones that abused the privacy of their citizens. They followed them everywhere. They listened to their private conversations, and they compiled secret files on them. This is exactly what the marketing industry is doing today. The marketing industry is engaged in these practices to an unbelievable extent. The KGB, the Gestapo, the Stasi could only dream of having the depth of information about citizens that Google and Facebook and other ad tech companies have. According to a report by the Irish Council on Civil Liberties, people in the U.S. have their online behavior and location broadcast to thousands of companies and organizations around the world hundreds of billions of times a day. Google alone sends data to 4,698 organizations around the world, including organizations in Russia and China, and there is no control over this data about us once it's sent. A report to the British Parliament asserted that by the time the average child in Europe is 13 years old, the ad tech industry has 72 million data points on that child. And they are far more stringent than we are. The number in the US must be astronomical. Now, we would never allow or accept this level of spying on us by governments, but for some reason, we've learned to accept it by marketers. Now, next, targeting is a danger to democratic institutions. In recent years, we've seen a serious wedge in our society, in our political life, and there's a direct link between tracking by the online ad industry and the polarization of democratic societies. A study by a Facebook group of executives in 2018 reported that almost 2/3 of people who joined extremist groups on Facebook were directed there by recommendations from Facebook's algorithms. And where do these algorithms get their data from? From tracking us. Tracking is also a national security threat. A bipartisan group of U.S. senators wrote in 2021 that the information gleaned from tracking would be a gold mine for foreign intelligence services that could exploit the data to inform, quote, and supercharge hacking, blackmail, and influence campaigns. So tracking is not just a marketing issue or a brand issue. It's a societal issue, and it's very dangerous to democratic societies, I think.
I'm curious about the industry side of things as well, it feels to me like there are potentially a lot more things to point out there, whether they're bigger or smaller, of course.
The industry is obsessed with tracking because they think it will make for better targeting. Okay. And all ads are targeted and always have been targeted. Nobody runs ads for motor oil in Vogue magazine. It doesn't make sense. Targeting is just common sense. The problem with targeting is how the targets are derived. And that's where tracking comes in. The fundamental premise and promise of tracking is that it would help create better targeting. Of course, this is a cruel joke. We've all seen the idiotic effect of being targeted for products that are of no interest to us. And that comes from how foolish the data collection and tracking industry is. There was a study by a company called AdLook, a digital media company, and they took data that was derived from third-party data providers. And they took that data about segments of the population and they compared that to what those same segments said about themselves. So there's what the data said about them and what they said about them. Here are some of the results. 47% of the people who the data said were women were men. 50% of the people who the data said were men were women. 67% of the people that the data said were parents said they had no children. 52% of the people who were supposed to be 18 to 34 said they were over 35. 60% of the people who were supposed to be over 45 said they were under 45. 76% of the people who were supposed to be married said they weren't. Okay? If my dog, Roscoe, had flipped a coin, he would be more accurate than all this fucking data bullshit that the industry has collected. Here's another great example. There's a very smart woman called Ariel Garcia. She's the chief operating officer at Check My Ads. Okay. And she checked the files of 7 different data brokers to see what information they had on her. Okay. Here's what she found. She was in 500 different audience segments and with a bunch of contradictory, useless crap data. For example, she was both a man and a woman. She worked in food service, in agriculture, as a defense contractor, as an engineer. And she was simultaneously both on the poverty threshold and classified as high income. And that's the trash that tracking gets you. They are incompetent and irresponsible. And we're basing so much, not we, because I'm out. The marketing industry is basing so much of their spending on this nonsense that they're getting from data and data brokers. And it's all based on tracking, right? That's what tracking gets you.
So why do you think so many marketers still believe in online tracking and believe that online advertising works despite this evidence that you've surfaced to the contrary?
Okay. I hate to disillusion you, but there are a lot of really stupid marketers, okay? And they're not all stupid. There are some brilliant marketers. There are some, and there are some pretty good marketers. But a whole lot of marketers are stupid, and they don't know what they're doing. That's one reason they believe it. Second reason, it's better to be wrong in the normal range than to be right outside the normal range. And if you're a marketing person and you say to your CEO, yeah, I'm not going to do any programmatic online advertising. It's all junk, all that. You say, what? Coca-Cola's doing it. Budweiser, Apple's doing it. What do you mean we're not going to do it? Well, it's It's ineffective and it's wasteful. And, well, you're in trouble, man, because your CEO hangs out with other CEOs and he knows what they're doing. He doesn't know the facts about online advertising and about particularly programmatic online advertising. He doesn't know. And he thinks you're an idiot. So, which leads us to the next issue. The most compelling objective for a marketer is to hold on to their job, right? And online advertising, programmatic, I'm saying I want to differentiate programmatic from direct bought. But like 80% of online advertising is programmatic these days, I think. Programmatic online provides a lot of fraudulent numbers that make marketers look good. Our audience is millions of people, and click rates are this, and he dangles it in front of the boss and say, look how good we're doing. The boss don't know that it's 80% fraud, and he doesn't know. It makes the marketers look good, and they need to look good. They want to hold on to their jobs. So there's that. And finally, why do marketers continue doing it? It doesn't work as promised, but sometimes it works. And so, they have some indication that, and, over here it worked for me. So I'm not going to mess with that. So there's that also. But that's essentially what is keeping, programmatic alive.
There are so many threads that I want to pull on, and I don't want to, go down a rabbit hole and then start over at the next one. I feel like so many objections that you face to this are, I forget the exact term, but it's something like decision-making by exception. When you say the average man has this amount of grip strength or this height or whatever, and, the average American male is 5'9" or whatever the number is. And you go, well, I know most of the guys I know are 6 feet tall. So that must not be right. It's, okay. Birds of a feather flock together in that particular case. But also, if you have a pizza shop, I don't know, you have one pizza shop and that is it. Fairly small time, I assume, in this instance. There could be any number of types of online advertising that you're doing, but let's go with the fairly common. You're going to run some Google ads. Maybe you get into Meta or whatever, and maybe you are even being pretty disciplined about tracking your return, apparent return, direct response return by channel. Now, we can talk about multi-touch and all of that stuff because the consumer journey is like, I don't know if you recall this, but the old Family Circus cartoons where the little boy goes 1,000 different places before he ends up at the place he's supposed to be. And so, but let's just ignore that for the moment. Okay, for your small time pizza shop, you are spending $1,000 a month and you are tracking that, we get clicks, we get phone calls from those, and we track $2,500 of revenue back to that. Great. Whether we want to critique aspects of that, it might work for you. But then to me, it becomes much more obvious when you have a medium to larger size business, maybe not the Fortune 100s, but you have a big business that is spending, I don't know, whatever a big number is, $100,000 in monthly ad spend online, and they really aren't tracking their results. Not just how it's affecting their brand, but let's say direct response sort of ROI. And for them to take the pizza shop's instance of, well, Bob's wrong here as justification for why it works in their case, to me just seems like the you miss the fundamental point that you probably don't know when you run a lookalike audience on your website visitors that, well, if one of those people that visits your website is both a man and a woman and works in defense and also is a baker or whatever it says, then what is in your lookalike audience?
Let's get back to first principles about this. What can advertising realistically do? Now, in the case of direct response for it can get you leads, okay? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that if it's actual real leads and not imaginary, if it's not bots pretending to be people and all that kind of stuff. What can advertising realistically achieve? It can do a lot of good for you. But the most important thing it can do for you is to make you famous, in my opinion. Brands that are famous have an enormous advantage over brands that are unknown. If your brand is famous, your advantage over your competitor is enormous. Okay. Now, when you're dealing with human beings, the answer is never black or white, yes or no, always or never. It's always a matter of probabilities, likelihoods and probabilities. You're never gonna, whatever you do in advertising or marketing, it's never always, it's likelihoods. Is this likely to affect that? Is that likely to affect this? The most likely effect of advertising that will be positive is that it will make you famous. That's its most likely. So whether you're a pizza company spending $100 a week or a larger advertising spending $100,000 a week, the best way to spend your money is to make you famous among the likely consumers of your product and even some unlikely consumer, because you think you know who your target audience is. You think you know who your customer is, but you don't. It's been shown in marketing 1,000 times. You think you know, but you don't. And so my advice to anyone, if your objective is not just direct response, but if your objective is to build your business, the most efficient way to spend your money is in whatever media you think will make you the most famous. Maybe it's online, maybe it's television, maybe it's locally, maybe it's radio. I don't know. That's for media experts to tell you. But what I can tell you is the more fame you create, the more likely you are to be successful. It doesn't always work. Plenty of famous brands go out of business. We're talking about likelihoods and probabilities. And the likelihood is that famous brands will do a lot better than brands that aren't famous. So that's my advice on spending advertising dollars.
The last time that you and I recorded, I remember, I still think about this pretty frequently, actually. I misstated something and
I didn't catch you.
I think I remember you having a look for a second, and I attributed it to you deciding whether or not you wanted to correct me. But I said something like, people aren't going to respond or they're not going to buy from me just because I'm cool or something of that nature. And what I meant to say was just because I'm trying to be cool, just because I'm trying to be famous or look famous. And if I can, just for simplicity's sake, equate cool and famous for the moment, I think it's reasonable to put forward a scenario like, well, just because someone looks like an influencer, because they have the flashy Instagram photos or they're standing in front of a Ferrari or who knows what it is, does not mean that they are famous in, I believe, the way that you are stating. If they are actually famous, then people want to be near them. They want to be like them. They want to own that product because there is some sort of connection. There's something about it. There's a deep human need that it fulfills, or, any number of things. And so as I said, I still think about this, that really the point that I was trying to make, and the thing that I hopefully I was agreeing with you, is that becoming famous, which again, I do totally agree with you. One, it takes a long time. It's not often direct response. You're not going to see an immediate ROI, but that when you succeed, there are payoffs that are independent of immediate actions. I remember you had an example in your email newsletter a long time ago that you made a point about the reason that Volkswagen's sales in the United States bounced back within 12 months or 18 months or something like that was because they had a 50-year track record of brand advertising. And I think that it relates deeply to what you're saying, that we might need immediate response, we might need direct response, whatever it is, but you are unlikely to grow a famous brand, to grow a major, Fortune 100 company or whatever it is, if all you do is programmatic advertising.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest issues I think now in media is marketers' obsession with personalized one-to-one advertising. I think it's stupid. I think what you need to do is mass media among people who participate in your category. It may be localized. Maybe you're just a single pizza shop, but over time, your success is not going to be based on how many coupons come in this week. And a lot of what happens in direct response advertising is that the people who most likely to visit your pizza shop are the ones who respond to your direct response appeal. It's like, if you have to hand out discount coupons for 10 cents off on your $1 off on your pizza, where is the most likely place that you're going to be able to show success on having handed out those coupons? Online at the pizza shop. You go to the line at the pizza shop, you hand each of them a $1 off coupon, and they're going to redeem the coupon, and you're going to look like a brilliant marketer. Well, it's the same with direct response. A lot of direct response is talking to people. The people most likely to respond are the people who are already your customers, because they have an interest in what you have to say or do. So there's that. Bigger picture, though, only 5% of people are in the market in general. 5% of people are in the market for what you're selling at any given time. So when you advertise to just people in the market for your product by direct or anything like that, or what we call, what do they call it? Performance advertising, you're missing 95% of the people who might someday be customers. And, that's just plain dumb, in my opinion. That's one. And the other part of it is so much of the data you get is baloney. the number, the clicks and all. It has been shown to be, there's so much corruption, there's so much fraud, so many bots. There are more bots. There's more activity online by malignant bots than there is by human beings, if you can believe that. That was discovered by a company called Barracuda Systems.
I remember you once making a point that no one walks down the grocery aisles and picks the cheese or, whatever that product is because they align with the brand purpose, or that, I'm going to go with brand purpose because I can't think of any other phrases at the moment.
Marketers are living in a fantasy world, okay? And the fantasy is that people want to join the conversation about their brand, and they want to have relationships with their brand. And if we're lucky, they experience brand love. Also in the fantasies, consumers want to engage with our content, and they're hungering for more relevant advertising, and they're attracted to advertising that's more personalized. And my work in the agency business has convinced me of exactly the opposite. I think people are perfectly happy to have the shallowest of connections with most of the brands. They're quite satisfied just to buy the product and from time to time and then move on, right? And I think the facts back this up. The segment of a major brand's customer group that engages with the brand in any but the most transactional way is tiny. In fact, it's infinitesimal. They buy and they move on. Overwhelmingly, consumers do not want to join the conversation about your brand. They don't want to have relationships with your brand, and they don't experience brand love. All the horse shit about consumers wanting ads that understand them and that are personalized to them. In a poll done by the Harris poll people, 4 out of 5 people surveyed said that the collection of data for the purpose of ad targeting was a negative, not a positive. People don't need you to collect data about them so that they'll have conversations with you, all that bullshit.
I'm curious if you see, I guess, the marketing space, but maybe we could talk about life more generally like this. I was relatively early into social media. I think I recall you telling me, or maybe I read it at one point, that, you were tweeting or you were writing blog posts or whatever early enough that, you were able to build a following and, dare I say, become an influencer. But let's not even go there. So, but that I was just burnt out. I got burnt out around 2012 or so. I started to have concerns personally about privacy. And I think this is heavily influenced by my own personality, viewpoint, all of that stuff. But I started to feel like in marketing, there's a lot of trend chasing, shiny object chasing. And there's also...
Oh, you mean like the metaverse?
Yes. Like it's like hand waving. And it's like, we're going to do this thing like Pepsi Refresh or something, while, either it's other marketers, or maybe even it's you, if Mr. CMO or Miss CMO, who is like, you're talking about, we're going to do this movement stuff, or, as a lot of brands were doing up until the most recent administration in the US, it seems, we're all for these brand purpose things. And like I said, I feel like it's sort of like a lot of hand waving. And then in the back office, you have more like your performance marketers or whatever who are like, I'm just going to do the things that we know work. And in large part, whether they work for your goals, or not. We have numbers at the very least, and the numbers make it look like things work. And so there is this disconnection from reality, either that the marketing space really is disconnected from reality, or I as a CMO appear to be disconnected, but I'm really just disingenuous.
The whole brand purpose thing, it's just virtue signaling. That's all it is. It's corporations. I applaud corporations who do good things and help people. That's great. And God bless them. Keep doing it. But don't rub my fucking nose in it. Don't tell me how virtuous you are. I give to charity too. And so do you. I don't put up a fucking billboard to say how charitable I am. So don't do it to me. Okay. Do what's good, do what's right, and do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you can make marketing hay out of it. That's what pisses me off. And do consumers really respond to that? In very few. If there are certain companies who have built a brand asset out of doing things like that, people at Patagonia and there are a few others, and but for the most part, consumers couldn't give less of a shit about your virtue. They want a product that works well, tastes good, is nicely designed, and isn't too expensive. That's what they want. And if you're focused on other things, you're probably missing the point.
So I forget how I said it, but I said something about marketers being disconnected from reality, which is also something you've talked about, and not just sort of alluding to it or it being implied by some of the things that you're saying, but in your past writing, you've said things along this line. So as of today, I guess your best assessment of the marketing space generally or the direction that we're moving, what sort of reality do you think most marketers are operating from?
Let me answer that as it relates to advertising, because I'm an advertising guy. I'm not really a marketing guy. I know, but I think some of the great unrealities of marketers is they don't understand how advertising really works. And I'm going to be a contrarian here. I think effective advertising does not have to be relevant or differentiating or insightful or any of the other cliches we throw at it. The most propitious effect of advertising is to engage our enjoyment button and gain our attention. Advertising that we enjoy is far more likely to be remembered. Advertising, if we enjoy it, we're far more likely to remember it and for it to be effective. Marketing is about strategy. Advertising is about execution or enjoyment or entertainment, if you like. And I think this is a big factor that marketers don't understand. I think one of the most underutilized and underappreciated tools in the advertising toolbox is silliness. I think consumers love silliness in advertising. If you look at some of the most famous advertisements, and not all, but some of the most famous, they were silly. And of course, MBAs and CMOs would strongly disagree with me. They believe in seriousness of purpose. They believe that the foundation of advertising effectiveness is built on a bedrock of strategic relevance. I disagree. Marketing is about strategy. Advertising is about execution. Marketers take themselves very seriously and they take their jobs very seriously. Most people see the advertising industry as both boastful and ridiculous. And I believe they appreciate advertisers who don't behave with great self-importance.
I remember another point that you've made that I want to tie in here was you've said before that basically you've put forth a challenge and said, name one brand that has been made famous by online advertising. And people will bring out, I don't know, Casper or Purple or whatever mattresses. And I think what you've said is they may be big businesses in one respect or another, but name, a Fortune 100 or a Fortune 10 that is famous, that people respect at the top tier. And hopefully I'm at least roughly characterizing this correctly, but it seems like that going along with what you were just saying and that one of the challenges advertisers must face is going with that, sort of distinction that you've laid out, that marketing and advertising. Some of the challenges they must face must be things like when you're a public company, you have to report quarterly results, and the average CMO is only going to last whatever the number is now, somewhere between 12 and 24 months, more than likely. And so why rock the boat? You want to keep your job. And so maybe I believe you, Bob, but why would I change anything if it's just going to result in results, becoming famous 5 years from now? I need results this quarter.
Absolutely. And that's, where we started with marketers. Most, of their top 10 objectives, 9 of them are to keep their job. And they will do what they have to do to keep their job, even if it's not good for them. In other words, here's a way to look at it. The importance of keeping a job means that in a lot of circumstances, the benefit of the individual marketer is not aligned with the success of the brand. That they're out of alignment. The marketer wants to keep his job and do whatever it has to take to keep his job or her job. And as for the brand, the greatest success for a brand is a long-term success. It's over years. It's not what happened this quarter, as you pointed out, and not what's happened this year. And those are the things that are important to the marketer. Not important, but in the top of the mind of the marketer. So the disalignment of objectives is harmful to brands.
So I'm going to jump back a little bit. We were talking about tracking and privacy concerns, and I can't remember if I encountered this because of you or... So tell me if you heard this, but there is a Twitter account. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's something like National Security Pizza or something like that. And this Twitter account reports on pizza shop orders around the Pentagon, if I recall correctly.
You didn't hear it from me, but I've read the story. Yeah.
In brief, for those unaware, there was a spike in orders of pizza in the 12 hours or something before the United States bombed Iran, if I recall correctly. And I don't follow this sort of stuff much. It just comes up in, my LinkedIn feed or something of that nature. But this seems quite related to concerns about tracking that, we also have these things that people are carrying around their Fitbits at secure military installations. And then all of a sudden the outlines of this military installation are showing up on Strava or who knows what. And it just seems like all of this tracking, much bigger then advertising, is really a big concern.
It's a national security issue. And the pizza story is a great one. You know, Iran might well have known in advance because, people at the Pentagon were working late. They were working all night. What does this mean? We know that because of the activity of that pizza shop that everyone at the Pentagon goes to. We know that they had to stay open all night. So that's one of the sideshows of the tracking problem.
So I think you said something that was leading here, whether you intended it or not. And even if I'm misremembering, then, I think it's a reasonable thing to discuss nowadays. That, we have governments, other governments around the world, but also I think the United States either dismantling privacy protections or signaling that they're just not going to enforce some existing privacy protection laws. And so, do you think that there is some kind of worldview behind the choices or certain motivations behind the choices to dismantle privacy protections for the individual or the consumer?
I don't think there's any conspiracy or philosophy behind that. It's just that there are too few people with too much power. I'm going to talk about the U.S., and these people are very influential in Washington, and some of the most profitable companies in the history of the world are ad tech companies. And these people fund a lot of the politicians, and the politicians are not going to go against these people's wishes. They don't. The last thing that Facebook and Google and Amazon and all the rest of them want is regulation on spying on people. And they will fight, and they will spend enormous amounts of money and fight enormous legal battles to maintain their ability to see into the behavior of individuals. And it's it's depressing, and it's unfortunate, and it's dangerous, and it will lead someday to some very, very bad consequences, I predict. And it's already kind of leading to some very bad consequences. But when you're in the middle of the ocean, it's hard to know that if you're a fish, you think the world is all wet, so you don't really see the big picture.
I think I understood something you said earlier as saying that advertising or tracking, or maybe some combination of them, create division. And so I think that there is an influence on culture from, one or more of these things. And yet at the same time, I think something that we're saying is that advertising does not shape culture or influence culture in the ways that we might think it would. Like, gosh, I am at a loss for a great example, but when you think of, the great ads from history, and think of how everybody saw those and people were talking about them. That's sort of the example that I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, it seems to me like with division, there's a shaping of culture. And yet with hyper-targeting, with programmatic, more generally, that there is an inability to shape culture in the ways that advertising could.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of what you were reaching for. Back when I was a kid, there was an ad for Alka-Seltzer, and it was the spicy meatball.
Mamma mia, that's some species.
Cut. Spicy meatballs, Jack. Sorry.
Take 28.
Out, Tony, and action.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Cut. What's the matter with that? The accent. Cut.
Macy, micey, bossy, ballsy.
Take 59. And action.
Sometimes you eat more than you should, and when it's spicy besides, Mamma Mia, do you need Alka-Seltzer? Alka-Seltzer can help unstuff you, relieve the acid indigestion, and help make you your old self again.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Okay. Let's break for lunch.
You're too young to know that one, but it was, in nobody for 2 years went to a restaurant and ordered meatballs without saying, "Oh, that's a spicy meatball," because it was such a phenomenal advertising success. Anyway, yeah, you're right. There are two reasons why advertising doesn't shape culture the way it used to. First, as we said earlier, advertisers used to employ media that were mass, and they would try to reach as many people as possible. And one side effect of this is that when there was a campaign or a slogan or a jingle that was particularly distinctive, it would find its way into popular culture. That doesn't happen anymore because many marketers no longer believe in mass media. They believe in one-to-one personalized media. And I think it's stupid, but what major brands have been created by one-to-one personalized media? Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Toyota, Budweiser, Apple? No, they were all built by mass reach media. But marketers, for some reason, don't buy that anymore. Okay. A second reason why the effect on culture is no longer what it used to be is that most advertising has become awful. It's just not any good. It used to be that about like 85% of ads were terrible, but there were about 15% that were good. And now the ratio has changed dramatically. Maybe 5% of advertising is good and 95% is horrifying. Well, that means that there's only a third of good ads than there used to be. And they are not seen by as many people as they used to be seen by. And so naturally, the effect is not what it once was.
When you say that many marketers don't believe in mass media, do you think part of that is due to the fact that mass media is difficult?
Pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass. It used to be easy to reach a lot of people. Now it's really hard. If you want to become famous, like I say, you should, that should be your objective. And if you want to do it, it's hard, man. You need really good media people to figure that one out because it's so fractionalized these days. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be your objective. It just means it's way harder than it used to be, and you need way smarter people than you used to have in media. Sadly, we do not have way smarter people in media than we used to have. So there's that problem. It's easier to plug something into a computer and get a reader. Okay, I don't have to think very much. I can just, hit a computer key and get some kind of answer. But that doesn't cut it. You need to be smart. You need to think smartly. You need really smart creative people, and you need really smart media people to get to that level of fame that you want to get to these days. And there are all kinds of ways to become famous too. I mean, it's not just advertising. You can become famous by having a in public relations. You can do stunts. You can have a CEO who's good copy. You can have, there's all kinds of ways. Facebook and Google and Tesla didn't become famous through advertising. They became famous because the media fell in love with them, and they had controversial figures who were CEOs. And so, advertising is just one way to become famous. Now, the thing about advertising is it's the only way to become famous that you can buy your way into. You can't buy your way into any of the other means of becoming famous. And that's the one really special thing about advertising. You can become famous just for having good ads. And it's a great advantage to be that way.
I really appreciate that you brought up that last point, because I was remembering this quote from Arthur Schopenhauer, which, Bob, when was the last time you were on a podcast and Schopenhauer was quoted?
Oh, always. Yeah. They're always quoting Schopenhauer to me.
He said, so I brought it up over here. If a person only rides and never walks, she will soon lose the ability to walk herself anywhere. And I brought that up because, my wife, she grew up in Western Montana. We were there not long ago. We go every year. And her uncle raises bison. Every year he's got 50-something bison. And he was talking to her about tanning hides. And there's nobody that you can find to tan hides anymore. But if you have a really if the hide, when the bison is skinned or whatever, I know very little about this process, but when they take the hide off, if it's taken care of well, and then it's really well tanned, then it's worth a couple $1,000s. And he was saying there is end effect, there is no one out there that tans hides anymore. And so maybe I didn't need both the Schopenhauer quote and also this story, but my point being that it's difficult to have really awesome media strategy that is going to build your brand over time. It's hard enough to have great direct response strategy. It's hard to have good strategy as it is, but it's even more difficult to do great casting for a commercial or video of any type, to write the script well, to shoot it, to pick, to pick your placements and all of that. And so, if a person only rides and never walks, she'll soon lose the ability to walk herself anywhere. I'm thinking, well, where is that taking us? Do you have hope for the advertising space that, by and large, that there are enough people who know how to do the right kind of work that, that population can grow? Or how do you see things?
Well, if you ask me, do I have hope for the advertising industry? The advertising industry will go on. Businesses are not ever going to need to advertise. There's always a need to advertise, and they will go on. But do I have hope that it's going to get better? No, I think it's been getting worse since the internet. It's been getting worse, and that's because advertising has always been part art and part science, but the science part has subsumed the art part. I should say the pseudoscience part has subsumed the art part, and people who were brilliant creative people who won. I did a study one year of who won like Nobel Prizes and Pulitzer Prizes and, all kinds of creative area prizes. And I found that probably none of them could get a job in an advertising agency, despite the fact that they're brilliantly creative. They're not good casting for advertising. And that's what we're dealing with now these days, I think. But I want to get back to one of your points. I grew up in a project in New York City, and we didn't have any bison, not even one. Think about how deprived I was.
Okay, I brought up another quote here. So Jonathan Swift, he said that vision is the art of seeing things invisible to other people. And I brought that up because we could apply that in any number of spaces, but I think it's relevant to advertising because you have to see the potential. You have to have vision for the long term. Maybe we could talk about having a different set of values. I don't know, but that I believe you've commented before about even the role that the relationship between business and universities, about how, a lot of businesses expect that their new hires come out of school already knowing Google Ads or whatever it is. Whereas I don't know how long ago it was that a lot of businesses, white collar sort of jobs, really expected, we're going to hire this person and have to train them. And if I go through a class on digital marketing, but it's really just Google Ads or something of that nature, then it seems to me like earlier and earlier we are setting people in a lane, or we're limiting their view, we're putting blinders on them such that before you've even really gotten an idea of all of the possibilities for the world or for your career, we have said, you really got to learn Google Ads. And I don't mean to pick on Google Ads. It's a great technology in many, many ways, but just as an example.
Feel free to pick on them. I have no qualms about doing it. I don't see why you should.
So, it seems to me like it becomes hard to, like the Schopenhauer quote, to walk anywhere. It becomes hard to step out of the programmatic lane and think bigger. And yet there's probably an aspect of humanity where you yearn for possibility and danger and not knowing what's going to happen next. And yet if we constrain you earlier and earlier, and it makes it just harder to have vision and to see those things that are invisible, which is the future brand possibility.
I can only use myself as an example in this, but I'm not advocating ignorance, and I think education and learning stuff is very important in whether in university or in high school, wherever you're coming out of. It's very useful to be educated in that subject. But the problem is, are you being educated in the right stuff? As you suggested just now. And I don't think the marketing and advertising schools are teaching students the right things. And like I said, I can use myself as an example. I had no training at all in advertising before. I didn't even know what advertising was till I got a job. And I started writing ads, and I had to figure it out for myself. And I had no previous training, no education in it. But I had that, it made me have to work harder and to develop my own theories and my own opinions on how advertising works and the important stuff. And as a result of that, I think I have some unconventional ideas about it. And I think it helped me look at it in a more holistic way. And, I may very well be dead wrong about everything I've said here today. It's very possible. But at least I have a point of view that is personal and to some degree original. And like I said, I'm not an advocate of ignorance. I don't think it's best not to have training, but it's best if you have training that's correct, not training that's incorrect. And that's where I think, a lot of people are teaching marketing and advertising that never worked in the industry. They just took courses and they learned shit from courses, and they're just, they're adding some new stuff every now and then, but mostly they're repeating what they learned 100 years ago, and they've never taken the time to try to push the erase button and start from scratch and figure it out for themselves or learn for themselves how it really works. That's such an important part of being happy in your job, to be doing it your way, to figure it out your way. And, I don't mean to be a braggart, but, I made a lot of money ignoring the opinions of experts. And I think it's a very valuable, being skeptical is such a valuable point of view to have, particularly in our industry where there is so much bullshit. And, if you're skeptical in science, sure, that's fine. You try new ways to do things, but there's a bedrock of information that you're building on. In the advertising world, there's no bedrock of information. All there is, every few years, there's new trends popping up. Nobody respects what happened or even knows what happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years. They don't know. They don't learn it. They don't care. They think they know how it works. And, I'm sorry, I don't think they do. And if they took the time to just take a week and forget everything you learned in your courses and think for yourself, how does this really work? Because it's, marketing isn't about how marketing works. Marketing is about how human beings work. And if you think, look at me, why do I buy Coca-Cola instead of Bob's Cola? I don't know, Bob's Cola may be better than Coca-Cola, but Coca-Cola's famous. That's why I buy it. I don't think very hard about it. I don't do blind taste tests on which cola is better. I just, I go with the one that I'm most familiar and comfortable with. And, in most categories, that's how people behave. Now, in some categories, they do a lot of research and then go online but that's 5%. 95%, they go with what's familiar and comfortable.
People, when you say, why'd you buy that kind of cheese in the grocery aisle? Or why is it that you choose Coke over Pepsi? People will state something that is not necessarily the reason, because there's just so much going on underneath the surface, if I can put it in that way, unconsciously in your brain. And how else, really, I think you would agree with me, but I would ask plenty of other marketers and advertisers out there, do you think your best chance of influencing those unconscious decisions that people make is to one time say, do you want Bob's Pizza? Or to have insert it into their head, Bob's Pizza, Bob's Pizza, Bob's Pizza, in a way that is going to stick with them, such that when you say, why'd you buy Bob's Pizza and not Eric's Pizza? Yeah, sure, they'll give you some reason. But the reality is that it was in there and they don't have to know why they purchased it. You are, I'm going to go back to another thing. You are, at least in the way that we've been talking about it to them, famous.
Well, Daniel Kahneman and a good friend of mine named Richard Thaler both won Nobel Prizes, and a lot of their work is on behavioral economics. And they demonstrate that people are not logic machines, nor are they puppy dogs. There's a little bit of logic in decisions. There's a little bit of emotion in decisions, and sometimes it's all logic, sometimes it's all emotion. There's a continuum, and depending on what you buy. But you are right. People will always give you an answer for why they bought something, but that's not necessarily why they actually bought it. And no one's going to say, "Oh, I bought Coca-Cola because it's famous." No one's going to say that. They say, "Oh, I like it better." Why do I like it better? Because I drink it all the time. That's why I like it better. Why do I drink it all the time? Because it's famous.
Exactly. And if you're only hitting them when they're already standing in the line, as you said, then you miss all of those opportunities to be inserted into their consciousness, to be ever present. Everybody else that I know buys Coke, and that's why I buy Coke. I don't know. So, okay, as I start to bring it around to a close, I'm going to use the word consumer. I want to use it broadly. As in consumers, whether it's, you and I as individual buyers of Coca-Cola, as we've talked about, or Bob's Pizza, or who knows what, or if we're talking about B2B audiences, whatever, we can zero in or be really broad. Is the idea of the consumer different today than at some point in the past? And I believe, to the extent that you're going to tell me that it is there something that you would suggest that marketers or advertisers think about so that they can make their work more effective?
The answer is yes and no. About whether consumers today are different than in some point of the past. Circumstances change, but principles don't. Technology has changed consumer behavior to a certain extent, but the principles behind what consumers want have not changed. And one of the idiotic things that marketers have done is to create. It's really the research industry that has done this. They've been selling us a lot of baloney about Gen Z is this and Gen Y is that and Gen X is this, and how they're all so unique. And it's largely nonsense. There's just as much variety within generations as there is between generations. And the idea that everyone who was born in the year 2000 is suddenly uniquely different from the people born in the year 1999 is absurd. It's ridiculous. And, all of a sudden, hundreds of millions of people are different from, you can't, it's just so dumb. There's something called group cohesion, and it's a measure of how people within a certain group are likely to behave similarly. And there's an agency called BBH, and they did a study of group cohesion. And they found that people who floss their teeth have about 10 times the group cohesion as people in Gen Z. Okay? And people who drink Orangina have twice the group cohesion as millennials. So the idea that it's baloney. This Gen Z and Gen this and Gen that are far more heterogeneous than the research industry would have us believe. Believing in these categories is just laziness on the part of marketers. So the answer is yes, today's consumer is much less different than previous generations than the marketers would have you believe. What has changed most is the gadgets. The marketers seem to believe that because people are using new gadgets, their needs and desires have changed, but mostly they haven't. The researchers sell us this Gen Z, Gen X stuff because it's good business for them. They can go in and make presentations, and they get hired by marketing firms and advertising firms to tell them how this new generation, what do we have to do to attract this new generation? And it's mostly baloney.
I remember you writing an email, or it could have been a blog post quite a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago. And you had a paragraph or something from, it was a newspaper or maybe a magazine, and it was something about how the young people today are concerned with causes and whatever the issues were, progressive, whatever. And then, I've seen you do this, I've seen others do it, that you're like, when would you guess that was written? And it was like the Time magazine article,
1964, about baby boomers, all the things that people were saying about Gen something. It turned out it was not Gen something, it was baby boomers. So, the research industry in the marketing world is so full of useless crap. I mean, the methodologies that market researchers do would get laughed out of any scientific laboratory in the world. They're so unscientific most of the time. Just the way they phrase a question can have such an impact on the answers they get. And but the marketing industry buys it, the advertising industry buys it. So I guess it's good for business. It may not be good science, but I guess it's good for business.
Yeah, you remind me of I forget. There's a comedian who his shtick is, I'll put a link in the show notes because I know I'll find it. His shtick is sort of like data and kind of like nerdier topics, let's say. And he's talking about bad presentations of data and research. And he says something like,
and if we did the simplest of math, we'd avoid obvious problems in life, particularly when it comes to marketing and commercials. That's what marketing people are good at. They can take statistics and make them say whatever they want. They can make their message fit a statistic. So I figured if they could do it, I'm an engineer, I'm a pretty big guy, so I worked up some slides to prove that anybody can do that, if we can go back to my slides. So here you go. I looked at some statistics and I found these on the internet, and I'm just going to make it say what I choose to make it say. So they polled 1,000 people. Turns out 3 out of 1,000 people polled said they've choked on a potato chip. Not died, just, and they were fine. Same 1,000 people, only 1 in 1,000 said they've choked on a pretzel. So if you were in marketing, you could say, pretzels, the snack that's 3 times safer than the potato chip. Absolutely true statement. Suddenly people would be running from that dangerous potato chip. Kids are killed by them every day. Run! Another quick example. Your chances of getting Alzheimer's by age 85 are 1 in 10. Kind of scary, actually. The average smoker lives to be age 66. So if you were in marketing in a cigarette company, you could say, smoking lowers your chance of getting Alzheimer's. Right? Absolutely correct statement. I can see the commercials now. Go ahead, light up. You won't be getting Alzheimer's. We hope to stamp it out the next generation. Go ahead, 2 a day.
And I've participated in plenty of these things to be honest, where, you get in analytics and all that p-hacking and so on that is happening in particular in social science right now, where you get the right number and that's what the CEO sees, right? I think coming back around to one of the earlier things is there revenue? Well, no. Let's wave our hands. Yeah, we got followers, we got buzz, we got share of voice, who knows what. But did it move a business needle, I'm being very vague here, but hopefully people will be generous in how you're hearing me here. But let's not talk about that part.
A lot of that goes in. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. As I said, you've been really generous with your time, and I would talk to you once a week if you would give me the time. But so where do you direct people? And then, connect with you or whatever else? Should we send them to the 3-word brief or something else? And then if we haven't covered something, or if you have words of wisdom, if people remember nothing else, what might that be?
The most important thing, if you're working in advertising, try to have fun. It's become a very serious business. And all my friends who are still in it say it ain't as much fun as it once was. And it's not that serious. People aren't going to die because you make a bad ad. So try to enjoy yourself and try to do something good. We need more good advertising. Advertising, it was once thought of as an art. It was like the black sheep of the arts, but it was considered, no one today would consider advertising an art. So try that, and good luck with what you're doing, Eric. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And anytime you want to talk, I'm happy to do it, but not once a week.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And where do we send people?
My website, but it's called bobhoffmanswebsite.com. How's that for simple?
I like it. Well, okay. Thank you, Bob. I really appreciate your time. And I have no doubt that if people listen to this, they will enjoy it as much as I have enjoyed it. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Take care.